All right, my e-learning students. So instead of doing Zoom today, because I'm already recording the same thing for the in-person classes, I'm just going to have you guys watch the same video and do the same with them. It's pretty much the same as listening to me blather on Zoom. If you have any questions, I'm going to be checking my email, same as normal. I'm just going to be sitting on the computer, same as always. I just won't be live in front of you. So please feel free to message me with any questions you guys have. But let's get started on this warm-up. Okay, guys, here's your warm-up for the day. It is evaluate. It's that fourth and final part of a critique. It's the whole point of a critique to decide whether or not it's a successful piece of artwork. So in this one, you have an artist that had read a bunch of these news articles about how this is a real thing. In Florida, a bunch of meth labs have been flushing out all their waste through their pipes and stuff, and it was going out into the swamps nearby, and it made these like meth-addicted gators. I mean, obviously they're not this big or crazy, but that's where the artist took the idea. So you have a gigantic alligator with meth crystals coming out of the back of him attacking Disney World. He's even got the monorail in his hand there. I would say this is probably supposed to be humorous, supposed to be funny. Do you think the artist is successful? Do you think that idea comes across clearly? Could it be done better? Do you have better ideas than him? Or do you think it's just pointless? Anything counts. It's your opinion. We just want to know what your opinion is. You know, like at this point, you've already done a description. You've already done a visual analysis of like where things are balanced and how you use depth and, you know, colors and all that sort of thing. You've already talked about the interpretation of it, of what you think it means. Now, do you think the artist succeeded? Were they successful? That's what we want to know. So take about 5 minutes, write 3 or 4 sentences, and we'll get right back to you.
Take me out tonight, where there's music and there's people and the young and the light. Driving in your car, I never want to go home, because I haven't got one anymore. Take me out tonight, because I want to see people and I want to see light. Driving in your car, oh please don't drop me home, because it's not my home, it's their home and I'm welcome no more. And if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. And if a 10-ton truck kills the both of us, to die by your side, well, the pleasure, the privilege is mine. Take me out tonight, take me anywhere, don't care, don't care, don't care. And in the darkened underpass, I thought, oh God, my chance has come at last. But then a strange fear gripped me and I just couldn't ask. Take me out tonight, oh take me anywhere, don't care, don't care, don't care. Driving in your car, I never want to go home, because I haven't got one all along. Oh, I haven't got one. And if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. And if a 10-ton truck kills the both of us,
So hopefully you got an answer for that evaluate. Again, there's no wrong answer. If you think it was successful, great. If you don't, great. Just explain your reasoning. All right, so what we've been working on is the elements of art, and we've been kind of laying them out in the order that you use them to draw or paint with. So you start out with a basic line drawing to build your structure, your frame. And you use shapes to make those a little more three-dimensional. Then you add value to that, give it a little bit of depth, and that gives it form. So we want to make sure things have that form in 3 dimensions. And that's like shape and value are working together to create that. So now we've got a 3-dimensional shape with believable shadows. Great, but everything is the exact same texture, which just isn't realistic. When you go out in nature, everything has a different way it feels. Like it's another one of our senses, like sight and touch. We can really tell how something's going to feel by the texture and the look of it. So today we're going to do an exercise that's going to help us start to learn how to do texture and understand what's involved with creating a more realistic texture. So what I've got here on the paper is 6 cubes drawn out. And I'm going to have you guys do this, but you don't have to start on it right now. I want you to see what's involved first. What we're going to do with these cubes is we're going to give each one a different kind of texture. And these work really well for showing the texture of things. If you've ever played Minecraft, you've seen that in action. We're just layering these things with a little bit of texture is really going to help you learn the kind of mark making involved. So this first one right here, we're just going to do is like a basic wood grain, which most people have done when they were younger. But if you haven't, it's all right. There's always time to learn. It's these kind of like natural flowing lines. You don't have like knots in the wood, stuff like that. And the lines are going to form around it. So the kind of line and texture you're going to make is definitely going to decide how this thing feels. But there's some more to it, to how to make it realistic. Now, the number one thing to do to make it more realistic is think about value. We're still thinking about where the light's hitting this cube, where the darkest side of it's going to be, where the lighter side's going to be. Now, you can do that by increasing the amount of lines in your texture. You can show more detail of it in here, get really in close. Lots more lines is always going to make it seem darker and have a higher value. So we know that this side's lighter and the shadow's over on this side back here. Just doing it real quick. So that's one way to show value. The other way of showing value is to put the value on the cube first, then do the texture on top of it. So let's say we got something that's a little more, let's see what else we got. Yeah, something like this. So we're actually going to just add the value first, just shading it in. Since I'm using a marker, it's going to be a pretty rough shade, but you get the idea. We're going to say this far side over here is going to be the one in the darkest shadow. We're going to say the top is going to be a kind of a mid-tone, so it has a little less value to it. And the front's going to be our light side, so I'm not going to have to add anything extra. Then we can just add our texture on top of that. Let's use a little bit darker of a pen. We give it this like bubbly surface. Just by putting in this line work and keeping it within like the cube, you can see how that value underneath it is already kind of informing us where the darker spots are. It's showing through that texture. So this one's more letting the value show through, where this one's creating the value with the texture. There's 2 different ways to do it. It kind of just depends what line work you're doing, what you feel more comfortable with. And that brings us to our next part, is repetition and variation. Now, a lot of the times with a texture, you create it by repetition, by using the same kind of mark over and over and over and over again. Especially things like fur and bubbles and cracks and things like that. It's just the same kind of line over and over. But by varying it, by not having the exact kind of line, it gives it a more naturalism. It makes it feel less robotic. So where, let's say you've got something with like hair on it going this way, just having it go straight across like this, it gets the idea across, but to make it really feel like hair, have a little bit of flow to it, have a little looser of an edge. That same kind of expressive line we're always talking about, that's where that goes. And you just give it this little bit of like it's blowing in the wind or something like that, gives it a much more naturalistic flow of this hair. And this would be a good one for that. Increasing the amount of marks helps increase the value. You just put more of these little dash marks and that becomes the darker part of the cube. And the third thing, and the one I really feel is the key to texture, like to really getting it right, is the edge. What do I mean by that? So if you just stick some lines on the surface of the cube, like this one, it almost just looks like a sticker that you've put on the cube, a picture of a texture. How do you make it feel real? You have to affect the edge of the cube. You have to have the little hairs coming off there, the bubbles creating an edge of the texture there. Leaving the edge flat is going to make the texture feel really flat. But if you go into a texture like this, and you add these like cracks in the edge, you show that it continues through. Pull you in a little closer so you can see. Suddenly when you break the edge, it gives that texture so much more life. Makes it feel much more real. Because it almost feels like the person could touch it. They get that sense of how it would feel better. And that's what you're trying to do with a texture. You're trying to give people a sense of touch through their eyeballs, which is not that easy. All right? So these are the big three with creating realistic textures. A change in value. And we've already done that with the sphere. We talked about parts of the shadow. There needs to be light direction coming from one way, and that puts the shadow on the farthest side from it. Easy peasy. Repetition and variation. It's the same mark over and over again. You just change it up a little bit to create things like density and movement. And then very last, affect the edge. Affecting the edge of it is what creates a very realistic texture. All right? So in your sketchbook or on a piece of paper, I want you to do 6 individual textures. Come up with 6 interesting ones on your own, and that can be any texture. Smooth, rough, furry, wet, whatever you want to get down, whatever things you think you can handle, just start experimenting with it. You can do 10,000 of these. It's a really good exercise. But most importantly, I want you to get 6 done, okay? And I want you to take your time with this. Don't just do the brick pattern you learned in elementary school and call it quits. I want you to work on this today and tomorrow. That means you have 2 days to do 6 of these. So they should take time. You should go slow with them. Make sure the values are correct. Make sure the edge is correct. And have 6 fully worked out textures, all right? So one like this still needs a lot of work. It still needs all these edges, the backside, the top, all that needs to be figured out still. So this should go slow, do a good job, practice craftsmanship, and get a good texture out of it, all right? So go ahead and get to work, guys. And like I said, you'll be working on this today and tomorrow.